Welcome to Geek Culture Online. I'm your host, Patrick. All right, four for four. Here we go. I'm going to leave that one in again just for good luck. Welcome to Geek Culture Online. I'm your host, Patrick Bolin, and we're going to skip the 2021 formatting once again. We're going to continue doing these reviews for WandaVision throughout the whole entire run. And we're just going to continue from there. We're going to try to dig up all the Easter eggs in episode 4. Now,
Hey, Patrick,
yes.
since right after WandaVision, we're going to be going right into Falcon and Winter Soldier, and then Loki, and then Black Widow. We might as well push the 2021 format out to 2022. Like everything else has been postponed with COVID. So
Yeah, it was a 2020, which pushed to 2021, and just mirroring everything else, we're going to push it to 2022. So, boom. All right. Well, maybe we're going to have to end up doing 2 episodes. We'll see what happens. But again, everybody, welcome. Ethan's back again. Yay. And wow, there's we're just like the episode, we're going to jump right into it. Now, again, it opens up with the Marvel logo, and again, Vision and Wanda are not in all the superheroes they show. They show even Guardians of the Galaxy people, but Wanda and Vision are not even shown, not even Quicksilver. So
it's been pretty much the same for each episode, right? It's been the same
combination, the same thing. Everything's the same, but those 2 or 3, if you want to, include Quicksilver, are not in the montage that's open. Right. So if it's intentional or if it's just the way it landed, that's here nor there. Now, boom. Again, they open up with doing a review of previous episodes. Mm-hmm. Now, they go through and it's Wanda is describing all this, and we're still in the wide format as the modern shows are being done. And then we go right to, boom, the timeline is established.
Yes. Now two things that are a little bit different here. Yeah. So first of all, there's no sitcom format this week.
No.
So we didn't know that. We did kind of suspect that with the way the last episode ended, that we were going to see things from the outside.
Yes.
I kind of thought maybe we'd still be seeing the next episode to maybe see it from the other's eyes. Mm. But rather than picking up, and I also thought maybe they would pick up right from where we left off last episode, where Geraldine, aka Monica, is shot out of the force field. But instead, we actually go back a little ways and get the backstory. So we basically see everything we've seen in the first 3 episodes, but from the opposite perspective. So instead of seeing it through the eyes of Wanda and Vision and inside the sitcom, we're seeing it from the outside world looking in.
And almost even the title kind of says this, because this episode is called "We Interrupt This Program."
Right.
So instead of doing the every episode's a different decade of a sitcom, we interrupt this program and we see it from the outside viewing in. And the timeline is established because this is showing the re-blip, the re-snap.
Re-blip, yeah. So when Hulk put on the gauntlet and snapped to bring everyone back, we're seeing the effect of this, and this is a little bit different than what we saw in Endgame, because in Endgame we saw everything from the perspective of the Avengers.
Mm-hmm.
So they were trying to figure out, did it work? And the way they find out is that Hawkeye calls his wife, and she answers, and then later on we see, all the blipped Avengers and Guardians all show up, and all the soldiers and everything. But we don't see, and we did see a little clip in Spider-Man: Far From Home where they showed what happened at the school. What I liked about this is it showed it was happening like the blip in reverse, where people were kind of like, instead of dissolving, they were like all the little particles were coming back together, and that's exactly how we see Monica Rambeau. So we knew that the character Geraldine in the last couple of episodes was actually Monica Rambeau. We knew that by the actress's name, and she was credited as Monica Rambeau for the series. But we see her and we find out that she was was disappeared in the blip, but her mother was not.
No.
And she shows up in the hospital. The reason she's there, her mother was in the hospital sick. She finds this doctor who she knows and finds out that her mother died 3 years ago, or 2 years after Monica disappeared. So that's establishing that same 5-year gap that was established in Endgame. So, so we know then that with the Rambos who were introduced in Captain Marvel, that the mother, Maria, is now deceased from cancer, and then Monica disappeared in the blip, and now she's come back.
And so this lands everything into the year 2023, and then it after they establish all this, it kind of show a time jump a little bit, where she's in a suit and she's going into this big building, which it's established that it's Sword's headquarters.
Right.
And then they show this big monitor that has all this information on there talking about the blip and all the return and all of this. So we're still seeing the impact of everybody coming back. And she tries to use her badge. To her badge is just like a day, like 3 weeks old, and she can't get in. And the security guard, calls her over. My bird, Coco. And yeah.
And then another gentleman comes over and lets her in. Basically, we discover that this is the director of Sword.
Yeah,
Hayward.
Hayward. That was I got Tyler, but I didn't get Hayward. Oh, and don't forget, Monica walks past a whole bunch of founder pictures, and one of them is
her mother, Maria, and it says Maria Rambo Photon, which in the comics that was one of the names that Monica's character went by as a superhero. Yes. So she was introduced as Captain Marvel, but then she also went by Photon and Pulsar.
Pulsar, yeah, and So, and also it does a callback to Captain Marvel because Monica's mom's had her nickname on her plane, on her jet.
Right, which said Photon.
So so that unless you freeze framed it, you didn't catch that. Right. And so they walk. Director Tyler and Monica walk through the building. They show a whole bunch of stuff. They show all this stuff being built, and they talk about this point is that you pointed out to me, and a lot of other people started. As soon as you mentioned it to me, then it started coming up on the web. So there's hidden microphones in both of our houses, or they wouldn't have picked it. We wouldn't have said it first.
Or it's Google and Facebook spying on everything on the internet.
Yes, basically, because you pointed out that when they said half our astronauts disappeared and the other half are afraid to go back up, your implication of that was because
they could be referring to the Fantastic Four, that perhaps Reed Richards, Ben Grimm, Sue Storm, and Johnny Storm were among those astronauts who are otherwise indisposed. Another reason people are making this connection is it was pointed out online that the color scheme that they're using for Sword is blue, black, and white, which is, of course, the color scheme used on the Fantastic Four's costume. So if they were, in fact, Sword agents who were in outer space, they might be already wearing those colors when they become the Fantastic Four. So we'll see in a few years.
Right, exactly. Or a few episodes. There is one other thing that kind of emphasizes your point. And then we saw everything come up. Everybody was talking about the same thing. Now, they couldn't have been the ones that were blipped out, but they could have been the ones that went that were afraid to go back up because what happened to them. So anyway, there's that hint, and everybody's trying to put all those little pieces together. When they get to Dr. Taylor's office, they all plop down in the seats there, and Monica is sitting there, and behind Monica is a set of pictures. I didn't catch this, though it was pointed out to me. And in the director's Tyler's office, there's whole bunch of pictures over Monica's shoulder that's in the shape of a hexagon.
Right. And that's important because we'll see other references to a hexagon elsewhere in the episode as well. So it's also through their conversation, we come to discover that Monica's mom, Maria, was the director, and then she basically left Tyler in charge when she passed away. So, and part of that was also because obviously, half of their people disappeared in the snap. So,
So
and then
she had set up contingencies in case leadership was gone. So
right.
How did she know?
Well, because she'd been sick.
Oh.
She had cancer. So
yeah. Okay. So it wasn't that she was planning on having half the shield sword agents disappearing.
Right.
Okay.
And then the other thing is, he mentions that Monica's coming back to work after only 3 weeks. So that establishes further the timeline that this conversation is happening 3 weeks after she's re-blipped into existence. So again, we have kind of the timeline of where this is set.
So we know everybody's back who's the after effects of Endgame, and knowing that, does this take place? This would have to take place before Spider-Man 3 then, because that's
yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, so this is sandwiched between those two.
Yep.
Oh, and I forgot what it means, but Director Tyler's office number has something to do with a Avengers comic that talks about Vision in there, and I didn't write that down. Anyway, Director Tyler sends Monica off on a mission, a missing person, not a missing person, but a case of interest, I guess. And they show her driving her agent truck into New Jersey, and then she takes an exit ramp, and on that exit ramp, it says Westview this way, which I didn't think about this until this right now. She pulls up, she meets Agent
Wu,
and some
and real quick, so the director Tyler tells her that he needs her to take care of this situation where the FBI is asking for help. So that's significant because Wu is not in Sword; he's part of the FBI. So, and that's who she meets up with there, just outside of Westview.
And Agent Wu is from Ant-Man.
Ant-Man, right?
So they're tying this TV series to the movies, whereas other like Netflix shows weren't tied.
Right.
So it's and so Agent Wu's there and everything. I wrote down Agent Wu's license plate. No, not Agent Wu's. Monica's license plate. Trying to figure, because last episode numbers meant something. This one I couldn't find anything about it. ZB718. Can't find any connection to it. But since the other people on the internet, bless them, found a connection to Agent Tyler's room number, so I was hoping that there was been something about that. And also, Agent Wu and Monica asked the police officers, what's the significance about Westview, and they say that it doesn't exist.
There is no Westview, but they're from Eastview. So there is an Eastview, but not a Westview.
So where does the exit sign comes from then? Because does the city is in some type of protective field. We know that much. Mm-hmm. But miles behind, there's an exit sign for Westview. So how much of an influence is there of this? Because everybody's aware of a town that doesn't exist. They don't want to get close to it. But as far as everybody knows, it shouldn't exist. So the cops leave, and I was thinking like, boy, they don't seem to worry about a town that doesn't exist. They don't seem very concerned about it.
Right.
Oh, and the police car had a number on it, which I didn't write down. It didn't. It went right flying past me. But that it ties to a Strange Tales comic book that had mind control in it. So there's that thing, and also the sign. They pointed. Monica asked about. He says, "Well, there's a sign there. Um, if the town doesn't exist, where does the sign come from?" And as also she points out the population, which was 3,892, 3892. Can't find anything about that. So they've established a lot of things. Now we know what's going on. Is it doesn't exist. It doesn't. It's not supposed to exist. Nobody really wants to get close to it. And so Monica pulls out a sword drone, which there was colors involved with that one.
Yeah, so the drone is in the Captain Marvel colors, so it's mostly red and blue with a little bit of gold, and it makes sense because, of course, in the Captain Marvel film, Monica, who was then a child, is the one who helps pick out those colors for Captain Marvel as she's adjusting the different colors on her suit. So it makes sense.
Yeah, and so she sends off the drone and it disappears.
Right, and that drone is what becomes the helicopter that Wanda finds in episode 2,
in which they emphasize later on.
right? But notice that it changed shape, so it looks different, and it's just all red with a little bit of gold on it when she finds the helicopter. So when things go into the field, they change.
They try to modify themselves to whatever is going on, but that was a black and white episode, and the copter was in color.
Right, in red.
In red, and so then they they do another time jump, and it's 24 hours later, and the whole place is decked out with sword gear, and there's tons of buildings, there's a ton of tents and lights and soldiers and everything else, and they bring in Darcy from Thor. Yes, and they're calling her doctor, so therefore, in that evidently she did not blip out, and
she finished her doctorate.
Yes, so we know. Well, now we can start checking off who got zapped and who didn't. Obviously, she didn't, and she doesn't seem to be too fazed by all this. But she goes in there and starts setting up all this equipment and stuff. And this kind of helps your argument about the FF, because she pulls out all this gear and uses a radiation detector to find CMBR, which was cosmic background radiation.
Right, and they say that it's the leftover radiation from the early moments of the Big Bang.
And then if you really wanted to try to add more pieces to that breadcrumb trail to the FF, the beginning of the universe, before that, there was another universe, and that's where Galactus came from. Okay. And Galactus is FF's biggest adversary. He's not really a villain. He just likes eating planets. He's an anti-hero. So therefore, they're hinting to the Big Bang, cosmic radiation, which gave the FF their powers. So right there is you can't put any more pieces into that argument without it actually being true. So yeah. She finds embedded in that cosmic radiation a signal, which is an old TV signal, the old analog TV signals, and so she's able to pick up the episodes 1, 2, and 3 that we got through watching.
Right. And so she brings in like an old television set and hooks it up to the monitor that she's using and is able to watch the show. So and we actually even see a shot that suggests the shot we saw at the end of episode 1, where somebody was watching the show on a monitor and taking notes. And so pretty much we can assume that was Darcy the same. Who was doing that.
Yeah, because there was the sword notebook, and you see her pushing it too. So now we know the connections. It's like every single episode ties to another episode, some either previously or in the future. So we got the pieces locked into that one, and so now they're starting to put all the pieces together. And one thing that Wu has set up this board, whiteboard, and there's a whole bunch of information on there. And one of them is that it's a 5-mile field around the town, and it's
hexagon.
Yeah,
hexagon shape. Yeah.
So therefore, that's been in multiple episodes. The Bewitched episode, the moon was there, and there was 6 dots surrounding the moon, which if you connect the dots, it's a hexagon. There was the pictures in Haywood's office, hexagon, and the town is surrounded by a hexagon. So, and why? I don't know, but they start writing down all these things and start watching the episodes, and then they start identifying the characters in the sitcoms.
And it should be noted that they identify everyone except for Agnes and Dottie. They identify the other characters we've seen who've had speaking parts, even the mailman, but they do not identify Agnes or Dottie. So that is of note, I believe.
But they've identified all these as sword agents.
Were they all sword agents, or did they just have profiles that sword?
Well, they all had a profile up on his board with a copy of their ID clipped to it, except for Agnes, who was as an unknown. There was no ID connected to it. And Dottie, did Dottie have a piece of paper on the board?
I don't think so.
Okay,
I'd have to go back and watch it, but. Well, here's the other thing I'm thinking is if they're not, they could be sword agents, but they could also be people, because it's mentioned when Director Tyler tells her about this job that there's someone in witness protection in that site. Now that could be Wanda, but they could also be other witness protection people in this town too. So they could have a file. Sword may have a file on them because they're there for witness protection. Just possible, or they could be sword agents.
And because on the board it says 2 missing, we know that Monica was one of them, but nobody ever mentions who the other missing agent is.
And there is an agent that goes into the bubble, but that happens after he has that on the board.
On the board, and on the board they also have a whole bunch of other things on there. There's like who's responsible, and they have scrolls, celestials, and then they under the part that says unknowns. It's just like, why is it a sitcom? Is it happening in the same time and same space? Is Vision alive? It's so. So they even Sword knows that Vision's no longer around, and if that's the case, and this takes place in 2023, Vision's still not around, even though that he died in 2019 with Infinity Stone.
Right.
Okay, so therefore, 5 years later, he's still not around. 2018. And then and then on his board it says failed attempts, and it's phone lines, digital, and drones. So, just like how Vision last episode said, I tried to call the doctor and the phones weren't working. So even inside, the phones aren't working. So it's just they're there for props or whatever. But remember when he picked it up, it was you heard a buzzing, or not a dial tone. It was just a disconnect sound to it, and so that makes sense of all of this. And that's Coco, my bird. Then Darcy comes up with an idea to try to. She keeps seeing a radio in all the episodes, so she's thinking that she's able to piggyback off of this signal and be able to break through the dome and talk to Wanda.
and so she has Agent Wu attempt to talk to her, and that's where we get the scene that was in episode 2 where Wanda was hearing the voice coming through the radio saying Wanda. What does he say?
Is
Wanda,
help. It says, who's doing this to you, Wanda? It says, help me,
who's
help
doing
me,
this?
Wanda, help me, Wanda. Who's doing this to you, Wanda? But the thing is that we saw Dottie break a glass and her hand gets cut, and they're in black and white, but her hand cut is blood red. But what
Right,
they see being broadcasted on their TV sets on Sword is that it cuts. We don't see. They don't see the signal getting through. Darcy thinks it's a failure, but somebody
right.
edited the broadcast.
Hmm.
So therefore, they're only seeing what they want them to see. So it's what's happening inside the dome and what is being shown outside the dome are two different things. So whoever is doing this is fully aware of what's going on. That the outside got broken through and they stopped it. It wasn't Wanda this time
Right,
because she interacted with Dottie and then they moved on. Whereas previous episodes, when Wanda saw something that she didn't like, she altered it and backed everything up a few seconds and started the same segment over again. So this is the first time that we see an outside force preventing everybody else from knowing what's going on there. Then it goes to the commercial.
right. So maybe Wanda or someone rewind it and take that part out, and we just didn't see it,
Mm.
or somebody's editing it. That's for
Well,
sure.
yeah, they're messing with what is being broadcast and who's broadcasting this and why. Because if this is
Right,
happening in Wanda's little world, why broadcast it out and why alter it? There's been a rewinding in the last episode, just like a VHS tape. This time, and then the last episode, there was a jump cut, and here we're seeing the show being edited. So as the technology is going on, um, then it's kind of the technology of the editing is matching the technology that's being shown on the show.
right. And
Then
then we find out how the beekeeper manages to
yes,
get there. So that's actually a sword agent, and he's in like a hazmat type of suit. They have him uh, go underneath through the
sewer.
sewers to come up in the middle of the town. They figured out that was a way to get through the field, the force field around it, which is why we saw him in episode 2 coming out of the manhole cover. And so as he's going through the force field, his hazmat suit is changed into a beekeeper suit, and then there are these bees around him. So
Yeah, it's
um,
because the reality of him tried to change him in such a way that it kind of matched what he was already wearing.
right, and that goes back to what you mentioned before. Um, so when they see the helicopter in episode 2, Darcy and Wu are talking, and they say, "Well, that's the drone. Why does it look different?" And Wu says, "Well, maybe it's to match the production uh, standards of the show, or something like that." So
Yeah,
so somebody is manipulating things to look different as they enter into the show, so to speak.
and to prevent people from recognizing that there's something going on outside the town.
Right.
And then if you notice the line that was connected to him, as soon as he goes through, it breaks off, and then they pull it back through, and it's like an old 1970s plastic jump rope. The
Right.
end of the cord, because when Monica gets thrown out, she's still wearing her 1970s outfit. She didn't
Right.
convert back
To her
to
sword
her.
form.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So anything that goes in comes out modified.
Right.
So and then let's see here. Oh, and then they kind of review the scene of Wanda and Monica talking, and they're kind of showing more what happened in that scene, because their interaction, and where Wanda says like, "Who are you?" and all this stuff. And Wanda says, says you're, and Monica goes, "I'm your friend." He goes, "No, you're a stranger and an outsider."
Right.
And then she punches her through the wall. She goes flying through the field, unharmed. And then Wanda's kind of puts the wall back together, and puts everything back in the order it was. So, she's fully aware. Wanda is fully aware of what was going on, but why and all of this stuff. But she puts it all together and everything. And then they redo that scene where Vision comes home and goes like, where is Geraldine? And she goes, well, she had to leave and stuff. And then Wanda looks away and then looks back at Vision, and he's changed.
Right. So he looks similar to how he did at the end of Infinity War, where his color is kind of grayed out in his face, and he has a big chunk of his head missing where Thanos picked out the Infinity Stone out of his head.
Which kind of reflects back to the West Coast Avengers storyline, where Vision throughout the comic books has either been deactivated, destroyed, broken, or dismantled. And in this storyline, he was dismantled and put back together again, but without his Wonder Man's personality, which was what makes Vision Vision in the comics. And so when they put him back together, he was pale and white and gray, or like a very light shade of gray, or more of a spirit or a vision. But he had no personality of remembering anything what made Vision Vision. So he looked very much like that here. And Wanda freaks out, looks away, and looks back, and he's back to the way she sees him.
And if I'm not mistaken, when at the point where we see Vision looking gray and looking like The Walking Dead, that the screen is widescreen, as if we're seeing what's really happening. And then when Wanda kind of snaps things back into seeing him normal, it goes back to the 4:3 screen, like the old sitcom show. So
yes, and then it says she's freaking out. Wanda picks up one of the kids. Vision's already holding one of them at this point, and Vision, and he goes, he's seeing how stressed Wanda is, and Vision says, we don't really have to stay here. We can go anywhere we want. And Wanda gives him a very serious look and says, no, we can't. And then Vision looks confused, and Wanda says, this is our home. And then he goes from confused to concerned. He goes, are you sure? And she goes, don't worry, darling, I have everything under control. Then it cuts to a scene where it opens, and this opens where Wanda blasts through the field. Monica lands in the field and stuff, and they go a close up, and they went back to the large format, the wide format, the modern format, and they zoom in on her, and she says, it's Wanda, it's all Wanda. Mm-hmm. So that's her perception of what's going on. And then it cuts back to the sitcom, and Wanda's looking at Vision, and she walks past him and says, what should we watch tonight? And Vision looks concerned. Then he puts a smile on, like he's putting a good front up on. He knows something's going on. The facade has been broken. He knows that this isn't right. Then they sit back down, where every single episode ends this way, is where they sit down in front of a TV set. He uses a remote and turns on the TV, and they're both looking at the TV, except this time. Because
this time he's looking past the TV.
Yeah, he's like looking at the audience. And then the ratio is still the old sitcom ratio at this time. And then there's the laugh track, and which is weird and spooky. And then there was also music to this. And then they cut to the sitcom credits, then they cut to the show credits. And in this, the credits are altered, where every single time that we show like a digital picture of Wanda and Vision, this time it was different.
Right. And wasn't it the picture of Vision with his face gray?
Yes, instead of being his red or his purple face and they zoom into his eye, it's the dead Vision and they zoom into his eye. Then it's just like it was before. They do the digital rose and the house, the staircase, everything else is identical except for the eye they zoom into is the dead Vision eye.
And the song that was used at the end of
Yes.
this episode was Voodoo Child Slight Return by Jimi Hendrix.
Mm-hmm.
So is that some reference to Voodoo Child, Vision's
Zombie.
zombie? You know, I mean, read what you will out of that. So
Yes, but there was throughout the whole entire episode, there was a whole bunch of numbers in there. Some of them have been all allude to either Avengers or Strange Tales or other comic books, but all those all have to do with Vision, Wanda, Vision coming back in some format. So it's all alluding to all of those issues in this episode. But that zombie song kind of tells it all. Is it they're hinting saying that this is completely Wanda's fault, and if that's the case, why is it a digital field?
right.
And it's just now let's do speculation. They're hinting. Well, they're hinting that that the Fantastic Four is involved here. They
Well, I don't think they're involved with
the
the
show.
events of the show. I think just tangentially to Sword, that they're
Okay.
somewhat related to Sword. So,
Well, who do you think if Wanda is not controlling this, that means there's somebody else controlling it. Who do you think it is?
so it could be Agnes, who is we believe is possibly Agatha Harkins, or
Mm-hmm.
perhaps Agnes and Dottie, since neither one of them is identified.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of speculation online. A lot of people seem to think it might be Mephisto.
And why is that? Because of the posters that were released this week?
Well, I was seeing that even before the poster
Oh,
was released. So
yeah.
people were speculating that. I think because of the storylines in the comics. Um, was Mephisto in House of M?
Yes.
Okay, so that's one reason. So some people are thinking maybe it's Mephisto. Um, we do also know another bit of speculation. Elizabeth Olsen, the actress who plays Wanda, did kind of let it out that there will be some surprise guest towards the end of the show. The question was asked kind of like similar to what we saw in Mandalorian, where Luke Skywalker shows up at the end of the last episode. And hopefully, you guys have already watched Mandalorian. That's not a spoiler for you. It's all
Too
over
late.
the internet, though. Too late. It's all over the internet. But so they were asking, was there going to be a similar appearance in this show? And so she did kind of hint around that somehow there would be somebody appearing. So there's a lot of speculation. Maybe it's Mephisto. Maybe it's Ultron. There were some credits that listed James Spader, who did the voice of Ultron, as being part of the cast of this show. So
Mm-hmm.
perhaps we'll see Ultron, or maybe a flashback to Ultron at some point, since obviously he was involved with Wanda getting her powers,
Yes.
um, and also involved with the creation of Vision too. So maybe we will see a return of Ultron. Another interesting actor who's credited for this series is the actor who played Quicksilver, but not the Quicksilver from the MCU, the
Mm-hmm.
Quicksilver from the X-Men films. Evan Peters is the name of the actor who played Quicksilver in Days of Future Past and Apocalypse and Dark
Mm-hmm.
Phoenix. So perhaps that is also alluding to that this series will somehow open up the multiverse. So because we know that it's already been established, Marvel has said that this series is going to tie into the next Spider-Man film and
Mm-hmm.
the next Doctor Strange film. We know that all the production reports with the next Spider-Man film is that it will be some type of multiverse story. They're bringing back the previous actors who played Spider-Man. They're bringing in actors who played villains in those other Spider-Man films. So that will be a multiverse story. We know that the Doctor Strange film is actually has multiverse in the title, so there will be something involving the multiverse, and Wanda is going to be one of the characters in that film. So perhaps we're going to see Quicksilver as a way of introducing the multiverse,
Hmm.
because perhaps the Fox X-Men movies are in a different universe than the MCU movies. So a lot of different possibilities and a lot of different questions that could be out there.
But
And then you have a theory about who else the surprise guest may be, right?
I think, because this is taking place in 2023, and they're saying it's a surprise guest, and using the analogy that it's a Luke Skywalker type of character, I'm thinking it's Agent Coulson, because Sword is a spinoff of Shield. Shield, um, up to this point, before the blip, was dismantled and being rebuilt. So at this point, going by their timeline, it could be easily Shield is being brought back into the fold, and Coulson would be then in charge
And
of this mission.
and there are reports that Clark Gregg, who played Agent Coulson, is going to be reintroduced into the MCU. So there have been reports that he's going to be back at some point, whether it's in WandaVision or somewhere else,
Mm,
maybe the Secret Invasion series, maybe Falcon and Winter Soldier, maybe one of the other movies. Who knows?
yes, but yes, I think that they're going to fold everything that's out there back to into one timeline. So this would be an easy way of doing that with Shield. Because there's in the comics there's Shield, there's Sword, and there's Hammer, and there's no um, explanation of what Hammer stands for. But but so going by that, then it would make a lot of sense because of Secret Wars and everything else to bring in Shield, because that would reintroduce Nick Fury and kind of tie all that together. And we still don't have, if it could be. Um, I'm thinking that the villain in this involves Kang, which is it's more of a digital high tech thing. It's a time since he's a time traveling villain of the Fantastic Four
From the future.
from the future.
Mhm.
So going by all the pieces that we see sprinkled throughout this episode, emphasizing or hinting of the FF, this would be another way of tying the FF to this by bringing in that villain.
But then why would he be using retro sitcoms if he was from the future?
Because in one of the iterations, he goes back into time to the 30s and establishes himself because he, in the modern time, which was in the 80s at the time, he fought the Avengers, lost, went back in time, and thought that if he was able to establish himself earlier, then it would be easier to conquer. So therefore, he built up these huge corporations which were involved with Exxon, which not Exxon, Roxanne, which was responsible for Deathlock and AIM and all these things. So he um, was tangentially involved with building all these villains and all these villain corporations by jumping back into the past. And when he got to the modern age, then he tried to do it again and obviously failed. So
And we do know that Marvel has cast an actor to play Kang in the
yes, so this may be a backdoor to the Fantastic Four. But seriously, I think what they're going to do is that they're going to introduce something that they're going to bring another superhero team at the end to protect everybody from Canada, and it's going to be Alpha Flight that's going to come in and save Wanda.
So for those who don't know Patrick, he's been pushing for Alpha Flight to show up in every uh, MCU film for the last couple of years. They
Yes.
were going to be part of the post credit scene of and pick a Marvel movie. That's what he was predicting. So
Wait, it all ties together. It makes sense, and that way they can introduce Wolverine by bringing in Alpha Flight, and then it's just then that which in turn introduces the X-Men. So
right.
Alpha Flight has to be in this one.
Okay.
Case closed.
Yeah. So a lot happened in this episode. So a lot of questions were answered about some of the things we saw in the first 3 episodes, but then just as many questions were left open for us
Yeah,
and introduced to us. So still a lot of pieces of the puzzle to figure out. We've still got 5 more episodes to go. The next episode looks really good from the preview. So
yes, I also heard that there is a 10th episode.
yes, there's rumors of that as well. So
yeah,
nothing confirmed, but there's rumors that it's there's a 10th episode,
which would overlap with the first.
Well, no, right now there's actually a week in between. So it would be episode 9, a week off, and then episode 1 of Falcon and Winter Soldier. But if there is an episode 10, then there would be no break. It would basically go all the way up to the end of WandaVision, and then the next week, here comes Falcon and Winter Soldier. So
okay, so we've delved into a lot of this. We've hopefully we've filled in some of the puzzle pieces, and this next episode is going to be very chock full. And if they're going by the time slots they've been going through, they're going to be doing a ton in a very short amount of time. And so we're going to have to hit that pause button a whole lot on this next episode. But for everybody that hasn't watched it, whip out Disney Plus and catch up. And then please put your own theories into this. You can go to geekculture.online and put your comments in here. You can also go to like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any place that you listen to podcasts. You can listen to us there. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Now, it's very important for you to rate and review, especially in Apple Podcasts, because the more that happens, the more it's recognized, the more we can keep the lights on. So you can also reach us on Twitter at Your Geek Culture. You can go to Facebook and get to us at Geek Culture Online. And that's about it for me. And thank you very much for putting up with us. And we'll see you next week. I'm Patrick.
I'm Ethan.
Have a good one.
See you later.
Thank you for listening to our latest episode. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. You can reach us on Facebook at Geek Culture Online and on Twitter at Your Geek Culture. Until next time, I'm your host, Patrick Pohl.